anatomical names are applied to different parts of the bladder. So, I will try to make it more simple for you. I cannot make it simpler. Einstein said you can make things simple, you can make it simpler. Now, the anatomy textbooks will describe the urinary bladder when it's empty. And here the urinary bladder is empty. And it's described as having a tetrahedral or a three-sided pyramidal shape. With it, the urinary bladder when empty is described as a tetrahedral, four sides, or a three-sided pyramid when empty. The most posterior aspect of the bladder is called the base of the bladder. Okay? The most posterior aspect of the bladder is called the base of the bladder. And that part of the bladder in the man is related to the seminal vesicles and the rectum further back. In the female, of course, the genitalia comes in between, the vagina, cervix comes in between. So that's the inferior posterior aspect which is formed in the base of the bladder. So we have the other three sides of the pyramid now. The superior surface is simply called the inferior surface. Yeah? But as the bladder fulls, it loses this three-sided pyramidal shape and becomes ovoid. With me? And this is where the clinicians now will call this the dome of the bladder. With me? They are now referring to the superior surface as the dome of the bladder. The clinicians refer to the posterior part, which is always fixed as the fundus of the bladder. But for your anatomy now, remember the base and the superior surface. Yeah? The other two sides of this triangular shaped pyramid are the interior lateral sides. Just like on a boat, the part that's related to the water are the right and the left part of the boat, yeah? So those are the interior lateral surfaces of the bladder. Do you appreciate this? The base, or the fundus, the superior surface of the dome of the bladder, and the two interior lateral surfaces. Yeah? These are related to the levator bucket. Where the superior surface and the two inferior lateral surfaces meet is referred to as the apex of the bladder. And at the apex of the bladder, there's a structure called the urachus. Remember that from the embryology? Yes? Which will proceed upwards from the apex of the bladder up towards the vicinity of the umbilicus. Yeah? Okay? Now, there is also another description, and this is hard to imagine. There's an area called the neck, or the bladder neck. On the pyramid, there is nothing looking like a neck, isn't that right? Yeah? Good. And that's why the description of the urinary bladder is a bit troublesome. I'm making it simple. Where the two interior lateral surfaces meet, and I'm showing you with my hand, right and left interior lateral surfaces meet, where they meet, and where the urethra leaves the bladder is referred to as the neck of the bladder. Or some people really include a broad area called the bladder neck. In the male, needless to say, the bladder is resting on the prostate, so that increases to the appreciation. Whereas in you ladies, there's no prostate and it's not resting on anything there. Okay? So you appreciate the bladder, the terms used anatomically and the terms used clinically. Okay? Alright? There are 4 angles, 4 surfaces for the 4 angles. At the superior lateral angle there, we have the 2 ureters here. Okay? At the anterior angle, we have the urachus. And down there, at the inferior angle, we have the neck, where the urethra. Remember, it's not urethra, it's urethra is leaving. So with that, I think you all can appreciate the outline of the bladder when full, it loses this appearance and becomes ovoid spherical like a balloon. And this is where the term fundus is applied to the superior surface. The dome that is should be the dome, yes, and then the fundus. Now, you'll also clinically they are referred to as the body of the bladder. And from the base, everything between the base and the apex is the bladder. This is the way the anatomical and the clinical terms are somewhat confusing. But for now, you will stick to this, and actually, because this is what we want to hear from you. I think all of you have an idea where your urinary bladder is. In the adult urinary bladder, where the kids are overfilled one, it's in the true pelvis. Normal does not come above the level of the symphysis pubis. However, people have a problem like, as we get older and have our prostate problems and we are not emptying properly, there's the residual urine, and so we'll be pouring more urine by the ureters. The bladder will extend upwards. Yes? With me? It will extend upwards. While spending so much time here, at birth, the pelvis is very tiny. And the urinary bladder at birth is an abdominal organ. It's not within the body pelvis. Yeah? So when you venture in the world of pediatrics, like down there, when it's investigation where children are not thriving or have signs of infection, we can stick suprapubically and get into the urinary bladder and collect a good clean sample of the urine by examination and culture purposes. You understand that? By the age of 6 months, the urinary bladder in the child will have descended into the false pelvis. And by puberty, it will have descended into its true adult position, into the true pelvis. Okay, so we make use of this feature for collecting fresh samples of urine from children. It looks wicked, to go and puncture the belly of the child. Collect urine from, but we need a clean color sample for examination. But before you stick the bladder, always ensure that the bladder is full by percussion on the clinical methods. You don't want to stick the bladder when it's empty, because you'll obviously get no urine, and you'll probably get other structures which you don't want to get. Now, the superior surface of the bladder. Remember the superior surface of the bladder? Where the synapse comes out anymore. It's covered by peritoneum. Yes? And anteriorly, the peritoneum would have come down somewhat down here in this more empty state, and then reflected upwards back onto the back of the anterior abdominal wall. But as we get older and the bladder fills up more, as the urine fills up and the bladder is elevated, it pushes off the peritoneum from the anterior abdominal wall. So in this situation, the urinary bladder can be approached extraperitoneally. With me? You can tap it with a needle, or more, what is commonly done when these guys get enlarged prostate cancer, they obstruct the urine and carry that fluid in through the urethra. We can give local anesthetic to the skin and get right down onto the bladder. There's local injection, and you just open the bladder, between a catheter, so-called suprapubic testosterone, and that's a procedure that all of you will see one day soon. Alright? So that's the significance of the peritoneum in that aspect. It covers the superior surface of the bladder and it gets down somewhat onto the posterior surface, but not all the way down. To just about the top of the seminal ventricle. This is the top of the seminal ventricle, just about there. It comes down. You remember, and it's reflected off from the bladder now onto the bladder, the peritoneum. And it's now forming a recess there called the rectus, the cycle pouch, you remember? And needless to say, we have xenon-bilious fascia, which is separating the urological apparatus from the rectum proper. Okay? Now, anteriorly, the male organ, the bladder, is related to the back of the pubic bone. And there is a space which is filled with fat here, called the retropubic space. Remember the retropubic space? And the two pubic bones, there is a little arch, the inferior pubic ligament or the arcuate ligament. And from both male and female, we have the blue structure. More pronounced, obvious in the man. The deep dorsal vein of the penis is going through the triumphant arch. You know the triumphant arch? You see the pictures in France, the triumphant arch. All of us enter the world by passing through the triumphant arch, right? And most of us guys want to get into the triumphant arch. Isn't that true, guys? Okay, the girls, some of you are not getting this. Anyway, also passing under the triumphant arch is this deep dorsal vein of the penis, or clitoris to the female. Naturally, the man is in the female. And it goes there, and in the male, they enter into the prostatic or deep cycle plexus of veins right at the bladder. In the female, it's just the deep cycle plexus. Now, this space, retropubic space, you remember from the anterior angle, the urachus is going all the way to the umbilicus, and there's a fold of peritoneum which is raised called the median umbilical fold, and from your anatomy of the anterior abdominal wall, just laterally, you have the medial umbilical ligament formed by the obliterated umbilical vein. Now we have a triangular area all the way up to the umbilicus. And this area is referred to as the space of Retzius. Unlike this omental bursa, remember Mr. Gardner talking about the omental bursa earlier? The bursa allows things to move. Yeah? Bursa. The omental bursa of the stomach allows the stomach to move rather than physically without contraction. Similarly, the bladder can move upwards. Alright? So you appreciate that, huh?
What's the space called?
Retropubic space and the retropubic or space of Retzius going all the way up there to the umbilicus. The posterior relations are important. And the peritoneal relations are just to the superior and to the upper part of the posterior surface of the urinary gland. And one of the supports of the uterus as well. But all of these pelvic structures need to be supported. And the important thing is the pelvic floor, which is formed by the vata ini, and you can see the component parts there, the hypococcygeus, the iliococcygeus, and further back, the ischiococcygeus, or simply the coccygeus. But the consonant supports of the pelvic structures is easier to think of as C. Yeah? the theme on with the boat here, because these are found in the sea. And when the boat is big, liners are docked, they are anchored by moorings, isn't that right? These big ropes that tie the ship in place so they can drift about the place, and this is what a number of ligaments do. They act as moorings for these structures. Right by the bladder neck. In this instance, they're going to call the medial tuberoprostatic ligament. These are condensations of areolar tissue, elastic tissue, and smooth muscle fibers. They are called the tuberoprostatic ligament. The most medial to the midline or the medial tuberoprostatic ligament. In the females, it's obviously not there, and they are therefore called the medial tuberovesical ligament, with me, because they are going towards the bladder and the cervix. So in the females, the tuberoprostatic ligaments are replaced by the tubovesical and tubocervical ligaments. Appreciate? So these are the medial tuberoprostatic ligaments. A little more laterally, also from the back of the pubic bone, are the lateral tuberoprostatic ligaments. And in the female, the lateral tubovesical and tubocervical ligaments. More laterally now, we have the lateral true ligament. On the side wall on each side of the pelvis is the obturator internus. And you remember there's condensation of fascia, called the arc of tendinous, or the white line from which the levator muscle gets its origin, as well as its strong fascia. And vessels will run inside of this, like the uterine artery, which I showed you earlier. They will run in condensations of this and areolar tissue. In the case of the uterine artery, therefore, called the cardinal ligament, or also the lateral ligament. So they will run to the bladder there. Anterior mooring, there is the obviously radius urachus, the medial umbilical ligaments, and more laterally, they are the medial umbilical ligaments. That appreciated? Good. Seen this picture before? And I mentioned Marion's bar to you. And I mentioned Bell's bar to you. In the empty bladder, we said the uretary orifices are 2.5 centimeters apart. But as the bladder descends, they come pushed further apart and maybe as far as 5 centimeters apart. In the anatomy diagram in the book, the uretary orifices are very easy to see. But in real life, remember the guys are doing this thing on cystoscopy, like through the microscope into the urinary bladder. Didn't hear that.
Most lateral ligament or what is the most lateral ligament?
The lateral is called the lateral ligament. But I'm saying there are condensations like in the female with the uterine artery running, and you carry condensation of tissue with it. It's specialized and it's often called a number of things. So we say the cardinal ligament, transverse ligament, McEnroe ligament, all of these family names apply to that ligament related to the uterine artery. Okay, back here. So it becomes distended in your bladder and it becomes further apart as function. The uterine orifices are pretty difficult to see on cystoscopy. My only period was when I was doing urology for 3 months. Up to now, truthfully, I have not seen a uterine orifice. Even though the boss said, he told the thing in and moved his head and said, look, but when he moved his head and that slight 0.01 degree movement of the scope in the bladder is not there. And even presently, even with open operations, I have to say, urologists when they do the radical prostatectomy. Sometimes they can't even see the bladder. So difficult to do. And one of the investigations is that they have to push catheters up into the ureter, through the ureter office, so-called retrograde study of the ureter for stones and cancers and what have you. And it can be pretty difficult. And the key structures to look for these bars, Marian's bar and Bell's bar. And in that vicinity is where they will see the things. The books will tell you they can inject dye into the bladder. But if you don't find it at the first drop or two of the dye coming, with the dilutional thing, you'll find nothing because everything will be colored by the urine, the dye in the urine. So it is there. The ureter begins at this orifice here, at the axis. And the triangular area is called the tribole of the bladder, triangular shape. The mucosa, in early development, was from the mesodermal, but the rest of the bladder was from the urogenital sinus, which is from endoderm. And as we get deeper and older, everything, all the epithelium is from endoderm. Having said that, the mucosa of the epithelium, here the transitional epithelium, is smooth, whereas that in the remainder of the bladder, it's in folds, and that is the homologated expansion of the bladder with urine. Now, the superficial trigone there, I'm saying it extends into the pre-prostatic part of the urethra, that is the upper part of the urethra, and it's all the prostate, and the prostatic urethra, and ends about there, the superficial trigone. And in time to come when you study the urethra, there is a midline ridge posteriorly called the urethral crest. And it is believed that it's the superficial trigone that gives rise to this urethral crest. Okay? In you ladies, because the urethra is much shorter than ours, the superficial trigone extends all the way towards the end of the urethra. The deep trigone now comes at a deeper level, and that deep trigone with the middle layers of the through the smooth muscle will help in forming what is referred to as the internal sphincter or the genital sphincter. There we have the superficial trigone. There we have the deep trigone. I must mention that these muscles are also smooth muscles, but these trigonal muscles are much smaller than the rest of the detrusor muscles, and they are of mesodermal origin. So when we stick a needle into the trigone and say where the muscles come from, it's mesoderm, whereas if we stick the pin into the rest of the bladder muscles from the urogenital endoderm. Okay? The middle layer of the detrusor comes around, see there, yeah? And there is the detrusor called an anterior longitudinal bundle, and the middle part of the posterior longitudinal bundle. In the male, the superficial deep trigone and the detrusor muscles completely encircle the urethra. Yes? They completely encircle the urethra. And these muscles here, being smaller, mesodermal in origin, they are innervated by adrenergic nerve endings. Yeah? Whereas the rest of the detrusor is like cholinergic muscles. Now, yes, they now form the internal sphincter or the genital sphincter. So during intercourse, these muscles contract from the adrenergic influence. So when they ejaculate from the seminal vesicles, etc., are to go out into the urethra, they will not go retrograde. You follow me? They will go, the ejaculate will normally go continue in its normal direction. Alright? And this is because of the internal space up here. It's purely related to a sexual act. It has nothing to do with control of the bladder emptying of urine. Yeah? Now I did show you the bladder with the prostate sitting down there. And in we guys, bladder sometimes become enlarged normally. And if you have to remove either the bladder, the prostate with its bladder or resect it for benign situations, then you see where we will damage the genital sphincter. So that when the guy comes to ejaculate, instead of the thing going into the vagina where it should go, it goes retrograde into the bladder.
Oh God.
And one of my favorite programs is Dear Pants. I tend to bathe at about 12 at night, you know. When he's on and I'm amused, you know. And this is why some of the ladies don't want a guy to wear the condom. Many reasons why. But they say, should I mention this? Some dear pastor says nothing, you won't report me. Guaranteed.
Valerie.
Some of the ladies say they like to feel the warmth